Right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Wendy Castle, owner of One Bite Nutrition. Super excited to have one of our dietitians here with us, Nikki Bomar. Thank you, Nikki, for coming on this series with us. We're running a series about hormones and how it affects people's appetites. So today we're going to talk about cholecystokinin, and we kind of abbreviate that as CCK. So, Nikki, can you give us an idea of what CCK is?
Yeah, so CCK again stands for cholecystokinin, which we will just call
Mhm.
CCK for the rest of this video because it is so much easier. It's a digestive hormone. It's released in our small intestine after we eat. So its main job is to help us digest those foods and then again feel satisfied from those foods too. It plays a big role in, stimulating that digestion. It slows our stomach emptying and again triggering satiety. So it's one of those again natural appetite regulators.
Yeah, absolutely. So what triggers CCK to be released?
Yeah. So it's when things like fat and protein enter that small intestine. It's partially digested food is what we're looking at, but specifically those macronutrients of fat and protein. Carbohydrates do stimulate it. It's just less than the fat and
Mhm.
protein does. So it's one reason that, or one even more reason, right, to add to our pile of reasons that having a, balanced meal of carbs, protein, and fat helps us keep us full longer.
Yeah, we've said it again, or we said it before, we'll say it again, and we'll just preach
Right.
to the choir that it's all about the balance. One micronutrient or macronutrient isn't better than the other. It's really the combination of all of them working together and then finding the ratios that work best for you.
Mhm.
So what does CCK do for in somebody's body? Like if they're trying to understand the process.
Yeah, so lots of important functions, right? One of them being it signals our gallbladder to release bile. So that's going to help us break down that fat for digestion. Also, it's going to stimulate our pancreas to release digestive enzymes. That's going to help us break down not only fat, but also the protein and carbs, so all of our macronutrients. Again, it slows gastric emptying. That's going to help us stay fuller for longer.
Mhm.
And then again, the satiety signals to our brain, again, telling our brain, okay, like we're started processing this food from this meal, we're good.
Absolutely. So I know on previous videos, and I don't know if people are watching this sequentially, but we've talked about two other hormones. We talked about ghrelin and we've talked about leptin. So how is CCK different than those two hormones?
So great question to recap,
Mhm.
right? Ghrelin, our hunger hormone. Leptin, it's going to be our satiety hormone. And then CCK, it's going to be our short-term fullness hormone. So if we think of leptin as our long-term energy balance hormone or satiety hormone, we can think of CCK as like the short-term one. So it works really quickly within minutes of us starting to eat. It's helping us stop during a meal, right?
Yeah.
Faster than it's kind of the one that when we're just like mindlessly eating, the one that we're not listening to.
Yeah, yeah. And it's all that's one of the things that we kind of tell people to like take your time at meals, give your body some time to recognize the fullness. And that's what we're referring to is this hormone right here. Give it some time to
Mhm.
work. So how does CCK help with weight management?
Yeah, so it does this kind of indirectly, right? Kind of and more directly than our previous ones we talked about, leptin and ghrelin. Again, it increases satiety and slows digestion. So of course that's going to help us do things like reducing our meal size, regulate that appetite. And again, my biggest one is improving that satisfaction after eating.
Mhm.
But it also works along with a lot of our other hormones. We've kind of talked about these things now. Ghrelin and leptin are like that base layer, but appetite
Mhm.
regulation is really complex. Get influenced by food, stress, sleep, medications, metabolic health. So again, there's no single like one magic hormone for weight
Right.
management.
Yeah, and that just really kind of emphasizes that there's not one solution to somebody when they're, struggling with their weight or struggling with what they're eating during meals or feeling out of control at meals. There's not one solution. So having the support of a dietitian to kind of figure out what the big picture is and influencing each little thing that is a controllable factor can be helpful. So for those people that are wondering like how they can improve their CCK levels, like is there any sort of natural ways to do that?
Yeah, so again, balanced meals. Again, we'll say it once, we'll say it
Mhm.
again.
Mhm.
Probably die on that hill, you know? That's what's going to stimulate CCK release. So things that are like, dietitian approved, right? Including healthy fats. So we have things like avocados, nuts, seeds, oils, protein in all of your meals and snacks. And even if it's little, not a ton, still fine.
Mhm.
Not skipping meals, which is a huge one for pretty much everybody I talk to. Um, Even one meal that we skip can disrupt those hormones and kind of make you feel out of whack for a while. Again, like you said, eating slowly, allowing those hormones time to signal to our brain. And of course, something that I think most people tend to lack in is that fiber. So prioritizing that fiber, again, just additional support for us for fullness. Um, Very low fat diets usually reduce the CCK. Again, it has a bigger response to fat than our other macronutrients.
Right.
So we're likely going to feel less satisfied, which when we're thinking about dieting, a lot
Mhm.
of times people say, okay, well, I need less fat. I need less fat. It can kind of sabotage yourself there sometimes.
Mhm. Yeah, and I know I get the low fat diet in the past. Fat is our most dense
Hmm.
macronutrient. It's the most calories per gram. So, I mean, logically, it would make sense to try to limit that one. But in
Hmm.
reality, it plays a role on hormones and keeping us full. So, even though you might be having less of fat, you might be eating more calories overall because you're trying to make up for that satiety level.
Hmm.
And just a reminder to people, hormones are not like a light switch. It's not on and off. It's more of a pendulum. And so you've got to give your body time to adjust and regulate, and don't expect a black or white on and off um, feeling to, oh, I'm hungry or oh, I'm full. So why do high fat meals feel so filling or so filling for some people?
Yeah, so again, that fat is what's going to be triggering this CCK release. So it enters the small intestine, we release CCK, signals our stomach to slowly empty, and it increases that fullness. This doesn't always mean that high fat meals are better.
Mhm.
It's that in balanced fat intake that's going to support those natural satiety cues.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I'm seeing more often right now is like using avocado as like a spread. So like instead of
Hmm.
mayo or, we're seeing that more and more. And that's just a great way to show that, healthy fats can be a part of a healthy diet. So, there's tons of other tips that we could give, but that's just one example that popped in my mind. Um, and how does CCK play a role in digestion issues for some patients?
Yeah, so we kind of touched on it earlier, right? That bile release and the pancreatic enzyme release. So this dysfunction of those can contribute to like fat malabsorption and gallbladder issues, which again, there's some outside sources that can cause this, of course, different diseases and such. But right, these digestive symptoms tend to be very multifactorial. Right, I know you handle a lot of GI cases,
Mhm.
right? There's not usually one solution to all of these. But when we're having these digestive issues, they usually end up, affecting CCK,
Yeah.
right? Or CCK could be an issue here. But again, looking at this whole clinical picture is what, dietitians are taught to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those people that are always trying to find the solution, is there any hack for CCK in order to regulate appetite?
Yeah, right. So there's no safe or
Hmm.
sustainable, right? That's my biggest thing, sustainability. Way to manipulate the CCK, especially for quick appetite suppression. So
Right.
again, we're working with our body, not against it. So eating those balanced meals, including a fat and protein. Again, overly restrictive diets are something I talk about every single day. Supporting that sleep and stress, which I think patients usually, again, think we're a little crazy when we're asking about sleep and stress during that
Mhm.
first appointment, but I promise it makes sense in the long run if you stick with it long enough. Again, your body has this beautifully designed feedback system. It's just a lot of things that we do internally, influenced by environment, by these fad diets. It kind of wreaks havoc on that system. So listening to our body, not the outside sources, but the inside sources.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes people have ignored those cues for so long that it's hard for them to recognize when they're getting those cues again.
Mm-hmm.
And in regards to the stress, I'm glad you brought that up. I would say not every patient, but I would say the majority of patients I speak to, we talk about stress because it's a
Mm-hmm.
huge factor on people eating, whether it's emotionally eating or managing their appetite. Even some patients, we have a stress goal. I typically have 2 or 3 goals with a patient per session. Of course, a nutrition goal. Usually there's a behavioral goal, and then we'll either do like a stress management goal or we'll do an activity goal
Mm-hmm.
to try to help support them as they're trying to reach their ultimate health goals that they've set for themselves. Um, so to kind of wrap this up, what do you think is the biggest myth about fullness hormones like CCK?
Yeah, and I always like to include this, right? The myths, because you hear so much about things out on social media nowadays.
Mm,
But again, hunger and fullness are not just about willpower. Okay, these hormones prove to us that the appetite, it's biological, not a moral issue. If someone struggles with those fullness cues, it's rarely about discipline. It's that physiology, environment, and of course health factors as well. So all of these things are going into it. I feel like a lot of things on social media now make food a little too simple, right? Or
Yeah.
your weight goals too simple. Here are your nutrition goals in general. When again, it's super multifactorial. And so looking at the big picture is what we're doing. And again, whether that's, okay, maybe my food's great, but my stress is completely out of whack. Okay, we can help support with that too. Like you said, I also make stress goals, sleep goals, activity goals.
Mhm.
Um, it sometimes it seems silly to be like, okay, well, my goal, I'm going to try to be in bed by 10. Okay,
Mhm.
well, you're a dietitian. Why is that a goal with you? I'm like, because
Right.
it matters, right? It
Yep.
matters. All these things go together. And so knowing that it's, again, biology responses, not just your willpower.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that you say that because people, I feel like when they think of their health, they take everything so internally and they kind of
Mhm.
internalize their struggles. And there's more to that. I mean, we talk about controllable factors and non-controllable factors. And some of the
Mhm.
controllable factors can influence things like your hormones and things like that, but there are some non-controllable factors. I've got some patients that work 2 jobs and their sleep is low. They ran out of time in the day,
Mhm.
and so for them in that situation at that time, that's a partially uncontrollable factor. I mean, that's their situation. And so that's where we look at other different influencers that are controllable for that specific person. But that also kind of leads into not one thing fits for everyone. Not everyone's struggling with the same problem. Not everybody has the same solutions.
Mhm.
So for those of you watching this out there, if you need help, reach out to us. You can book direct on our website, onebitenutrition.com. You can leave a comment below. We're happy to kind of take a look at the bigger picture and help narrow in some of the areas where we think could be more beneficial for you to meet your health goals.